Most couples can talk about almost anything without it getting heated. Weekend plans, where to eat, whose family to visit for the holidays, even the hard conversations about parenting or health tend to stay productive most of the time. But bring up the credit card balance, or the fact that the savings account has not grown in 6 months, or that one partner spent $400 on something the other did not know about, and something shifts almost immediately. Voices tighten, defenses go up. What started as a practical conversation about numbers ends into something that feels much more personal, much faster than either person expected. And then, because it went badly again, the conversation gets avoided for another few months. And the financial decisions that needed to get made just quietly do not get made. This is not a money problem. It is a communication problem that money triggers. And the understanding the difference is what changes everything. The reason money conversations escalate so quickly has very little to do with the numbers on the table. It has almost everything to do with what money represents emotionally for each person in the room. For some people, money represents security, having enough means being safe, and any conversation that threatens that feeling of safety lands as a threat, not a discussion. For others, money represents freedom, the ability to make choices, to enjoy life now, to not feel controlled. For others still, money is tied to identity, to being a provider, to being responsible, to being seen as competent. When two people with different emotional relationships to money sit down to talk about a shared budget, they are almost never just talking about the budget. They are talking about safety, freedom, and self-worth without either of them realizing that is what is actually happening. That is why the conversation goes sideways. Not because either person is bad with money or bad at communicating, but because the conversation happening on the surface is not the conversation happening underneath. Here is an honest question worth sitting with before going any further. In money conversations with a partner, is the goal usually to solve the financial problem or to win the argument? Because those two goals require completely different approaches. And a lot of couples are running the win the argument strategy without consciously choosing it, simply because the emotional charge of the topic makes it hard to stay in problem-solving mode. So before getting to the framework, it helps to understand the financial personality types, because knowing which one describes each partner changes how the conversation needs to be structured from the very beginning. The first type is the security seeker. This person feels calm when there is a cushion savings in the account, no more debt, a plan for emergencies. Market volatility makes them anxious. Unplanned spending makes them anxious. What they need before any productive money conversation can happen is to feel like the baseline is stable and that the conversation is not a signal that something is wrong. Starting a money conversation with bad news, without context, puts a security seeker immediately into defensive mode. Starting with what is going well first, here is what is stable, here is what we have built, creates enough calm to have a real discussion. The second type is the freedom spender. This person experiences spending as positive, not irresponsible, but genuinely tied to their sense of enjoying life and feeling autonomous. Conversations that feel like restrictions, rules, or judgment land had for this type. They do not need to be convinced that budgeting matters. They need to feel like the plan includes room for them, that financial responsibility does not mean giving up everything that makes the present enjoyable. A money conversation that leads with "we need to shoot," but without acknowledging that enjoyment has value almost always produce resistance, even if the person knows the math is right. The third type is the avoider. This person finds money conversations genuinely stressful and has developed a habit of not engaging, not out of laziness, but because the topic feels overwhelming, shame-adjacent, or just too heavy to carry regularly. Avoiders often know set out problems but feel frozen about addressing them. Pushing an avoider into a high-stakes money meeting with a lot of agenda items is a reliable way to make sure nothing productive happens. What they need is a low-pressure entry point, a short, contained conversation with a clear ending time and no more expectation of solving everything at once. The fourth type is the optimizer. This person actually enjoys the numbers. They track spending, research accounts, think about interest rates and tax efficiency. The challenge here is that their engagement style can feel like criticism to a partner who is less involved, even when no more criticism is intended. An optimizer who leads a money conversation with data and the action items before checking in emotionally will frequently confuse and alienate a partner who needs to feel heard before they can think clearly. Most people are a blend of these types, and most couples are at least partially mismatched, which is completely normal and not the problem. The problem is going into every money conversation without accounting for what each person actually needs to feel safe enough to participate honestly. Here is the question that changes the dynamic. Before the next money conversation, has there ever been a moment of asking the partner not about the finances, but about how they feel when money comes up? That one question, genuinely asked and genuinely listened to, does more to set up a productive financial conversation than any spreadsheet or budgeting app ever could. Now the framework. 3 steps. Simple enough to actually use, specific enough to actually work. Step 1 is separating the check-in from the decision meeting. Most money fights happen because both things get collapsed into one conversation. The emotional check-in, how are we each feeling about where we are financially, what is worrying each of us, what feels good gets skipped entirely, and the conversation jumps straight into decisions. But for most people, especially security seekers and the avoiders, the emotional layer has to get acknowledged before the rational layer becomes accessible. A 2-minute check-in at the start, genuinely asking how each person is feeling about money right now, and genuinely listening without problem solving immediately lowers the temperature before any numbers appear. Step 2 is building a shared picture before proposing any solutions. This means both partners look at the same information together: the income, the spending, the savings, the goals, without either person owning the narrative. When one partner presents the financial picture to the other, it creates a dynamic where one person is the expert and the other is the audience, which often slides into one person feeling judged and the other feeling unheard. When both people look at the same numbers at the same time and describe what they see, the conversation becomes collaborative instead of corrective. The problem belongs to both of them. The solution will too. Step 3 is ending every money conversation with one specific, agreed upon next action, not a complete plan, not a resolution of every open question, just one scene, one account to look into, one subscription to cancel, one spending category to thread for the next 2 weeks. The point is not comprehensiveness. The point is momentum and the shared ownership. When both partners leave a money conversation having agreed to do one concrete thing together, it builds a track record of follow-through that makes the next conversation easier to start and easier to stay in. Run this framework consistently, even once a month, even for 20 minutes, and something shifts over time. Money stops being the topic that only comes up when something is wrong. It becomes a regular, expected, low-stakes conversation that neither person has to brace for. The chat drains out if it gradually, not because the finances are perfect, but because the process of talking about them has stopped feeling like an ambush. Here is the last thing worth saying on this, and it matters more than any framework. The couples who handle money well together are almost never the ones who agree on everything financial. They are the ones who have learned how to disagree productively, how to sit with different comfort levels around this, different values around spending, different timelines for goals, and they still make decisions together without either person feeling steamrolled or dismissed. That skill does not come from having the same financial personality. It comes from understanding each other's financial personality well enough to build conversations that actually work for both people in the room. Money is going to be part of every serious relationship for as long as the relationship lasts. The question is not whether to have the conversations. The question is whether to keep having them the way they have been going, or to try something that might actually change how they learn. The framework is on the table. The only thing left is deciding which conversation to start with. And look, if even one piece of this frames how the next money conversation goes, that's a real win, because this stuff has a way of compounding in relationships the same way money compounds in an account. If this was useful, hit the like button and subscribe. This channel covers the human side of money just as much as the numbers side, and this series a lot more coming.